what I decided to do on that Friday was probably the most stupid thing you could possibly imagine. I decided to put a £50,000 bet on one horse race. I watched that horse race that afternoon, and I watched the horse lose by a length, and my world come crashing down. I had one dream in life, and that was to become a professional sportsman, and all I wanted to do was to try and live that dream, and that was always my focus. When I was 18, I left school, I signed a 2-year professional contract, I left home, and I moved to Northampton. That summer, things went incredibly well for me, and I got called up into the England under-19 squad. Then at the end of that year, I then had another difficult decision to make, because I'd been offered a place at Durham University, and I was one of the lucky ones who could do both. I could carry on playing sport, but also get a degree so that I had something to fall back on. Gambling wasn't part of my life until I was 19 years old. And one Saturday morning, a couple of weeks after Freshers' Week, I got a knock on my door, and a few lads said to me, "Look, we're going down the bookies. Do you want to come with us?" I thought, why not? Let's go and see what this is all about. Walked in, and I stood in the middle of the shop. I was watching a guy play on a machine, playing a game called roulette, and I was transfixed with him playing on the machine. I then saw him punch the machine, storm out the bookies, and light up a cigarette. So I jumped in his chair, and I sat down in the bucket chair in front of the machine. I had £2 in my pocket. I put all £2 on green zero, and about 12 seconds later, it came in, and my life changed forever. £2 became £72. I walked out that night with £250 cash from £2, having won £170 off a horse called Majestic Roy. And I thought, you know what, that was fun. That was easy. I can make loads of money from this. I know loads about sport. And it gave me a kind of unbelievable feeling, a rush and a buzz. I had a year left on my contract. I was able to do my studies, go to the gym, practice, and gamble all at the same time. Unfortunately, I had a bit of an injury. I had a bit of a problem with my ankle. And I'm not somebody who's good with an idle mind. I hate being bored. I needed something to stimulate my mind, to give me that rush and buzz that everybody else was getting from playing. And obviously an easy fix for that was to gamble. And I started to do it more and more. And then when I got fit again, of course, now I had a distraction. Now I wanted to get out of training as soon as possible, to get down to the bookies in the afternoon. And of course, it started to affect my performance. And at the end of that year, I got called in by the head coach for my contract renewal meeting. I got released that day, sacked, and my dream was over. And it hit me really, really hard, because it was the first time in my life, really, I'd ever been told that I wasn't good enough at something. But my way of dealing with it was to run away from the problem. And I continued to work really hard. I was still motivated in that sense. And I graduated with a 2-1 in combined social sciences from one of the world's most famous universities. All my mates were moving to London, getting jobs in finance, and I followed the crowd. And I moved to southwest London, where I'd live with 4 mates for the next 18 months. We earned huge graduate salaries, had brilliant jobs, but my problem, unlike the others, was every time I got off the tube in the morning, I'd walk past 4 or 5 betting shops that I could go into at lunchtime or after work. And I thought, well, I don't have a problem with gambling because I've got enough money to live. I'm also doing well in my job, so why don't I carry on doing both, because I love it. A year into my job, I got called in by the CEO of the company and basically congratulated me on everything that I'd achieved over the past year. So he took me off the graduate scheme, offered me a promotion. What came with that was a pay rise and a bonus. 2 nights later, I'd obviously told everybody, and I said to my mates, look, let's go out and celebrate. I arranged to meet them in a bar in central London. I got there early. I wanted to go and put a bet on the football that was going on that night. And I thought, you know what, I'm feeling quite pleased with myself. I've just been given a bonus, a pay rise. It's money I didn't think I'd have. I might as well put a big bet on. I put a football accumulator on that night. I put £500 on this football accumulator. And I walked upstairs and I started to get drunk with my mates and didn't think anything of it. That night, £500 became £34,988. £35,000 is more money than a lot of people earn in a whole year, and I'd earned it in 90 minutes. Obviously, the feeling that it gave me was like nothing else. My problem was, by winning £35,000 that night, it totally changed my relationship with gambling, because now every time I placed a bet, I thought I was going to win £35,000. So I went from putting £20, £50, £100 on a horse and winning £500 to putting £1,000, £2,000 on a horse to try and win £35,000, and it didn't happen. I lost that money in 5 weeks. I'd started to live a lifestyle that was very different because I had the money to do so. Over the course of the next 6 months, I started to gamble almost uncontrollably in the hope that I might win £35,000 and, in my mind, stop. In July 2011, I recognised that I had a problem, not only because I'd taken out 2 bank loans as well as maxing out my overdraft. I'd missed my last month's rent payment on my house. I knew that things were spiralling out of control and I wanted to do something about it, but I didn't know what to do. So I decided to go home and speak to my parents. I had a choice that day. Do I tell my mum, do I not, about the gambling and what was going on? But I was so worried what they would think or say if I'd told them that I'd won and lost £35,000, that I was gambling every day, that I was getting myself into debt. I didn't want them to be disappointed in me, so I chose not to. And that was the biggest mistake I ever made. Instead, I blamed it on living in London. And I said, look, I don't like my job. I don't like the culture, the lifestyle. I want to go and do something different. And I said I wanted to become a teacher. I thought if I become a teacher, it will change my lifestyle that drastically, that it will get rid of the gambling. It will stop me doing it. And I got a job teaching history and Latin, of all things. And as head of cricket at a very famous independent boarding school in Oxford. As soon as I got used to things, I thought, well, do you know what? Actually, I'm going to start doing it again. And over the course of the next few weeks, I got back into it. I started to gamble more. But of course, not earning the same amount of money meant that there were challenges that came with that, because I was still trying to put big bets on, trying to win £35,000. And I started to get myself into a bit of debt. Initially, that was quite easy to deal with because I had a pretty good credit rating from my jobs and I could take out loans, which I did, quite significant loans, which I could afford the repayments on. Then when those had gone, I could take out credit cards, which I did. But once that had run out, I then sort of found an issue financially because there was a real blocker. And that was the point where things really escalated to the next level, working in a world where I was surrounded by people who were very wealthy. And I started to approach them for money, give them reasons that were complete lies. They wanted to help somebody out that they liked and respected, but as soon as I did it once successfully, I thought, well, do you know what, I'm onto a winner here, I can keep doing it. Started to borrow money, huge amounts of money off people very quickly, gamble it all away, and then just go back to somebody else. At the end of 2016, I decided that I needed to make a change again because I was worried that I was going to get found out. So I decided to move schools because I thought, do you know what, if I move schools, I'm not going to be around the people that I owe money to. It'll be harder for them to get hold of me. But of course, by moving schools, what it meant was that I had a whole new set of people or individuals that I could do exactly the same. I had 76 different online accounts. I'd borrowed money off 113 different individual people, and I had £497,000 worth of debt. My mental health was now severely affected, and for the next probably 2-3 months, all I was trying to do was to try and have one big win that would get me out of the problem. But in January of that year, I was on the way to a rugby festival. On that day, I had 9-year-old boys in the back of a minibus that I was driving to this festival, 16 9-year-old boys. I'd received a tip earlier that day from somebody who was involved in racing. Had said, look, I've got a horse running this afternoon. I think it's going to win. Put a significant bet on that afternoon. We then got caught in some traffic on the way to this rugby festival, and I was trying to watch the race on my phone, and I crashed that minibus. I thought, what on earth is going on? I've just put other people's lives at risk, not just my own, as a result of my gambling. I got to the rugby festival. They went off with a colleague who was already there, and I went back to the minibus, and I lay in the back of the minibus for about half an hour in floods of tears. It's come to a point where this is actually a matter of life and death. And sort of strangely, I then hit a self-destruct button. And for the next 2 months, I was gambling huge sums of money all day, all night. And in March 2018, I got called in by the headmistress of the school that I worked at. And she said, look, this is what's happened. You probably didn't want us to find out these things by looking through your emails, your school computer, but we have, and we've got to do something about it. She basically said to me at that point, look, we're going to open up a pretty significant investigation. If the findings are true, which I knew they were, this is going to result in you losing your job. And I would probably be taken to court for fraud. That might result in me being sentenced and taken to prison. My only way out of that situation was to gamble my way out of it. If I was successful in gambling my way out of it, then great, I'd be able to pay off the money. It would get rid of the debts. I might lose my house and my job, but life goes on. I won't go to prison. If it doesn't work, then I've got no option but to kill myself. It was the start of the Cheltenham Festival, the biggest horse racing festival in the world, probably my favourite week of the year for various different reasons. And I thought, well, this presents me with the perfect opportunity to do this. So what I did that afternoon was I rang somebody who had already borrowed a significant sum of money off. I told them another lie. I told them something I'm not very proud of. I said that something had happened to somebody in my family and that I desperately needed money to pay this medical bill, and that I would pay him back as soon as that had happened. And he decided that he'd lend me the amount of money that I asked for, which was £10,000. And I genuinely thought I could turn £10,000 into £152,000, which was the amount of money that I owed to parents at that school. On the Tuesday, the Cheltenham Festival started, and on the Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, I managed to turn that £10,000 into £50,000 because one jockey and trainer had an unbelievable day, and I decided that I was going to back them in every race, put them in an accumulator, a lucky 15, all those things that gamblers do. But £50,000, which is an extraordinary amount of money, a life-changing sum of money, wasn't enough. It needed to be £152,000. So what I decided to do on that Friday was probably the most stupid thing you could possibly imagine. I decided to put a £50,000 bet on one horse race in the knowledge that if it wins, I win £200,000 because the odds were 7-2. I'd be able to pay off that debt. I watched that horse race that afternoon, and I watched the horse lose by a length, and my world come crashing down. I went back into school. I had to go through various meetings, and it transpired that all the things that they believed to be true were. My girlfriend was staying with her mum in Oxford because she thought I was going on a school trip the next day. But instead I went on a night out. I had far too much to drink. I woke up the next day. I felt absolutely terrible. I received a message from her saying, "How's the school trip? Are you on the ferry yet? Is everything okay?" The guilt and shame that I felt at that point was just inexplicable, and I thought, do you know what, I've had enough. I can't deal with this anymore. And I picked up my car keys and I went and got in my car. After 3 hours of driving around, I arrived at Slough Station. I bought a £14.50 travel card with the £19 coins that I had, and I went and stood on the very end of that train platform. I stood there in floods of tears, people looking at me thinking, what on earth's wrong with this bloke? One thing going through my mind more than anything else was, you got to tell somebody. And after a bit of thought for various different reasons, I decided to reach out to my little brother. I didn't want to call him. I decided to send him a WhatsApp message. And essentially what that WhatsApp message said was, what I've been doing is so bad. I'm in a situation that I can't get out of. I've been lying to people for too long. This is what I'm about to do. Can you sort of say goodbye to everybody? He just heard the hardest thing I hope he's ever going to have to hear in his life. But when he didn't reply to that message immediately, which he often does, and I saw those two little blue ticks, I thought, well, that must mean that he wants me to do it as well. But actually, I think he was just trying to come to terms with what he just read. Fortunately for me, a couple of minutes later, my phone started to go mad in my pocket, and he was trying to call me. But I didn't want to pick up. My mind was made up. 2 minutes before the train came through Slough Station, he sent me a message, and that message saved my life. Because what that message said was, whatever you do, do not do this. Because I'm not going to be able to cope if you do. I don't think the other people around you, your girlfriend, your mum, your dad, your sister are either. And that was the moment in my life where I stopped thinking about myself and I started to think about other people. I started to think about the impact of what that would do to other people, but also the impact that what I'd done was going to have. And I decided to stand back, watch the train go past and not throw myself in front of it, which was the best decision that I've ever made. By the time I'd got home, my brother had rung my girlfriend. I walked upstairs. I gave her a big hug. I burst into tears and I said, look, I'm sorry. I've got an awful lot to tell you that you know nothing about, but I'm not in a position to tell you right now. And the next day, my parents arrived. I sat round a table with the three most important people in my life, and I told them everything. And it was tough. It's impossible to describe how tough that was, but it allowed me to be honest for the first time, and it felt like the moment that I was able to move on with my life. They didn't go mad. They didn't disown me. They recognized that I needed help. Fortunately for me, they'd spoken to somebody in the kind of 12, 24 hours leading up to that conversation who was a former addict, but also ran a rehab centre or treatment centre in London. I spoke to this person on the phone, and it was the first time that I'd spoken to anybody in probably 10 years who understood my situation and understood what I was going through. She said, look, come in on Monday and give me a chance. She said, give me a week, and if it doesn't help, then you can go somewhere else. And I thought, you know what, I've got an opportunity here. And I spent the next 4.5 weeks in rehab for an addiction that I didn't realize existed. I had to have a long, hard look at myself in the mirror, ultimately take full responsibility for everything that I'd done, try and get to grips with the consequences of it, understand why I was doing it, but also how on earth I was going to live the rest of my life without something, rather that had been such a big part of it. I came out of rehab and I thought, what on earth do I do with my life now? I had a burning desire to share my story with people, not because I think I'm some sort of hero who's going to change the world, because I'm not proud of what I did, I never ever will be, but because I recognized how easily I'd fallen into this trap, this world, and how easily it could happen to other people. Fortunately, in July of that year, I was introduced to Paul Buck, who's the CEO at Epic Risk Management. Paul's story obviously resonated with me, and what he did was an organization that I thought, do you know what, this is the perfect platform. In October 2018, I was given the opportunity to head up the education element of the business. Paul and Epic had a desire to work in schools because problem gambling and gambling amongst young people is a hot topic. It's something that's very, very relevant, and it's now so accessible. I love what I do now. It's amazing to be able to give something back, having taken an awful lot away. It's a cliche, I know, but if I can help one person, then it will be worth it.